Greetings and welcome to my channel. This is Sorcerer Tao. You can also find me on Facebook at the Sorcerer's Guild. Today, we are going to be continuing with my fictional works and reading the second story in the book, The Anarchies' Last Stand. It is entitled The Demon's Child and starts with a short poem before getting into the story itself. Okay, so without further ado, let's go ahead and begin. It all started that day, just before everything slipped away. Falling into the dream, I saw reason, drifting on my cloud of oblivion in the starless night sky. Her voice was like the wilds, taunting my soul, luring me onwards. I saw her sitting there that day, just before everything slipped away. The Unnamed. Okay, and the title of the story itself is, again, The Demon's Child, and it's in a few acts, but we're going to go ahead and read all of those tonight. So, Act 1. I am told my mother was a beautiful singer, though I never heard her. My father was a beast, a creature from another world. My mother used to go alone into the forest and sing to the trees. That is how my father found her. It is said that her voice was so pure, so free of fear, that his heart swelled and his body ached for her. So badly he desired this woman that he took on the shape of a mortal to seduce her. He was a demon from far, far away, her a mortal from long, long ago. Despite all this, he touched her, and she swelled with child. A demonic child in a mortal womb. This is my story. I still remember when I was born. It was spring, a new season for a new life. We were in a green meadow, my mother weak from the birthing. She shook as she held me in her arms. The scent of the new, fresh earth caressed my newborn skin with a gentle breeze. My mother looked upon me with all the joy and wonder of a new-found miracle. Despite my malformity, she found me beautiful. She traced her tiny fingers across my gentle infant's face, filling the soft cotton of a new baby's cheek. The rooting instinct made me turn to suckle on her fingertips. They slipped inside my newfound mouth. My demonic teeth severed them instantly. Screaming in pain and terror, she threw me into the brush and fled. It was then that she realized she had given birth to a monster. Strange sensations filled me then. Pleasure from the taste of the warm liquid and flesh that filled my greedy mouth, but also a stinging nettle-like reaction that pricked at my soul. My mother did not return for me. She left me lying in the weeds, in the hope that my father would return for my soul, or at the very least, that I would die. Fate, however, could never be so kind to such an unlikely child. I lay there in that thistle patch for days. I couldn't crawl. I couldn't cry. I couldn't move. Small things crawled in the grass and all over my skin, snakes and spiders. When they slipped over my mouth, I swallowed them whole. Thusly, I survived. I learned to crawl watching the creatures that moved around me. Deer and rabbits, foxes and wolves were my teachers, and I learned by observation. Nearby, a she-wolf had lost one of her cubs, so when she found the strange, naked, crawling baby, she took him in without complaint, though she was not fool enough to suckle him. Soon I found myself living amongst them, crawling, yapping, and barking for food in our den with my newfound siblings. My new mother taught me the ways of the wild, but even a demon's child must age, and I grew quickly. Within weeks, I was larger than any other member of the pack. In 2 months, I was larger than the den, but still a child. That is when it happened. I was playing with my brothers when the male of our pack attacked me. I had felt the needle-sharp stabbing aura that a demon knows as fear, but never before had I been aware of its source. His fear consumed me, driving me to a frenzy of violence. His feeble-seeming jaws could not harm my demonic flesh, but his terrified eyes stung me like burning knives. It was his fear, and not any real need for self-defense, that caused me to do what I did. By the time I understood my reaction, it was already too late. Covered in blood and fur, his flesh between my teeth, I realized my misdeed. The needle-sharp sting of fear erupted all around me now. This time it came from all sides. Even the once kind eyes of my brothers stung me, and I fled from this my shame. I fled from this pain that stung me. I ran as far and as fast as my child's body could carry my still awkward frame. I ran until I came to the edge of a lake. Thirst drew me quickly to its edge, but in the water I saw a beast, with huge grinning teeth and snake-slit eyes. This monster had no fur, but was covered in blood and sweat over a skin completely devoid of hair. This was the first time I had tasted fear for myself. I lunged quickly into the water, seeking the heart of this terrifying foe, and found myself fighting to keep my head above water. Gulping down gallons of the cold liquid with my screams, I finally managed to drag my half-drowned body from the cold water and mud. I looked again at the cold, calm water of the lake. I had never seen such a thing before. The water was so calm and tranquil that it had reflected my own face back at me. I looked again at my large, gaping teeth, my yellow, slit-like eyes, my long, clawed arms and tiny feet. It was then that I realized I was a monster, alone in the wilderness. This realization, though painful at the time, was the only thought that kept me alive during those many years that I spent alone. Act 2. I awoke to the strangest of sounds and the most wonderful of sensations. The sound was a bizarre, cackling merriment, accompanied by splashing. The sensation was like the soft, warm glow of a tiny sun beating alongside my heart. I pulled my head out from under the leaves of my makeshift den to observe the commotion. What I saw was amazing. There were creatures just like my mother, dancing and laughing on the shore of the lake. They wore a strange sort of fur, which they removed before entering the water. I thought to myself, perhaps if I don't try to bite them, they will allow me to join them. I slid closer, crawling on my belly to get a better view. Their eyes were round and bright, colored like the stars. They were beautiful. I did not believe that they would use the strange stabbing power to hurt me. When I emerged from hiding, their fear hit me like a swarm of angry wasps. The people fled, screaming and yelling, then ran off in several different directions, leaving their furs beside the lake. I could not understand their fear. Though far more beautiful, our features were almost the same. Some even had the horns and furry legs of my mother. Why did they fear me? I did not have the answer, but I knew it to be true. I was alone because of fear. I knew I could never be a part of them. I knew that every time I drew near, I would feel the sting. But in my loneliness and young age, I could not resist them. I began to follow their scent. Slowly, I crept towards their camp. Each day, I would come a little closer. But I dared not go too near, so I circled it constantly. Soon, not even a single day would pass that I did not at least catch a glimpse of one of these strange creatures. When I came the closest to their village, it was at night. My courage had grown at approaching them, and I trusted the darkness to hide my movements in the underbrush beside their village. They huddled close together as the nights grew colder. Standing in the center, one man was rubbing two sticks together, while a second blew on the area where the two sticks interconnected. Then something happened I would have never imagined. Something leapt from the wood. A strange, bright orange glow seemed to come to life from the pile of sticks the people had gathered. It was the same color as the sun. The small sun that they had conjured to earth fascinated me. I silently slipped close through the trees. By climbing up and through the branches, I managed to get within feet of the nearest forms. I was so near I could feel the heat from their tiny sun. I stayed there a long time, studying their faces, so like mine, yet so different. Their teeth were flat and white, their eyes were round, and their arms only hung to their sides, and did not dangle down to their knees, like mine. Some had the horns of my mother, but others had round, hornless heads like my own. Also, they stood totally erect, walking on only two legs. I had a rambling, stooping gait, using my hands almost as much as my feet to pull myself forward. It was in their hands that I saw the greatest similarity to myself, and the greatest difference. Their hands looked soft and delicate, like my mother's. Mine were gnarled and strong. Their fingers were long and thin and ended in short nails that seemed completely useless as weapons. Sharp black talons extended from the tips of my vicious-looking claws. In the end, though, they, as well as I, unlike any other creature of the forest, could pick up sticks and use tools, unlike my wolf brethren I had lost so long ago. I decided I would learn to use tools like these strange creatures. I would learn to carry sticks and make homes like theirs. I thought that perhaps, if I could learn their magic that brings the sun down from the sky on dark nights, I would be more like them and less like a monster. Act 3. I set about my plan to become more like the people of the valley. I gathered sticks and held them between my rough, feral hands. I spent night after night rubbing sticks together, hoping to find the secret of their tiny sun. I was patient at first. Day after day, night after night, I would rub sticks together, until one night, after many tries, anger began to creep into my rubbing. As I rubbed the sticks together, gripping them with my forefinger and bracing the back against my thumb. Excuse me. Let me take a drink real quick. I'm going to start just a little bit before where we were. Until one night, after many tries, anger began to creep into my rubbing. As I rubbed the sticks together, gripping them with my forefinger and bracing the back against my thumb, my anger grew with every inept twist of the greenwood twigs I had ripped from a tree earlier that day. My thoughts grew angrier and angrier. My yellow eyes and twisted face would never be accepted amongst the beautiful faces of the valley. Why did they fear me? It was not fair! I began turning the sticks faster and faster until my rage ignited the wood and manifested in a bright orange flame. Quickly, I gathered more sticks into the flame of my tiny sun. The flames of my sun grew and grew. As it grew, it began to consume the pile of propped up sticks I had made my home. And yet, even as the flames consumed my home, my anger at the people of the valley grew. Even my sun was different than theirs. While their sun was warm and peaceful, my fire was even more monstrous than I. Nothing about me was like them. They were soft and gentle. I was a beast. I fled the scene of my creation and left the sun to eat as much of the forest as it would. The flames I had ignited threatened to warp my demonic soul and stay with me, even as I ran. Hate is anger that stays, and now a burning anger seek to become my only companion. It was on this day that I first told myself that I did not wish to be like the people of the valley. They were weak and terrified of my power. If I could be loved by none, then I would be feared by all. Act 4. I continued to stalk the people of the valley, now not as my teachers, but as my prey. I was now becoming the monster they believed me to be. I learned to imitate their noises. I learned of names, and I learned of their individual names, so that I could call them from the woods at night to spread their fear. I would follow their hunting parties as they hunted. When one of them separated from the others, then I would follow them close behind, and fall on the branches above them, and fall on them from the branches above them. However, I always let them escape, to tell the others of the terrifying monster which stalked from the trees. As I began my regular patrols around the village, I noticed an old woman who sometimes came amongst them, from whom I felt no fear. Over time, I began to watch her as she traveled to and from the village. I even began to imagine that she knew I watched her. Despite us having no interaction, she soon became the closest thing I had to a friend. I protected her from afar, and she did not run from my presence, most likely because she was unaware of it. One day, as I watched my new friend, as I hid in a high branch of a nearby tree with a good view of the trail, I noticed a second pair of eyes watching the old woman's movements. A striped forest panther was moving stealthily through the brush, knees bent, keeping its body close to the ground as it approached the old woman's path, its intent apparent in its hungry green eyes. I slipped from my perch, high up in the tree branches, moving from tree to tree, and crossed the path well ahead of both the cat and the old woman, where neither would observe my crossing of the path. Then slowly, silently, I slithered my body amongst the leaves like a serpent until I reached the tree that stood in the way of the cat's approach, and made my way up into its branches in time for the cat not to notice my movements as I climbed into position in the tree's branches. My caution, however, had taken time, and the tree I picked was only a few yards from the trail, not well hidden from view as the old woman approached. When the cat arrived below me, I knew I had to act fast and silently if I wanted the old woman, to remain fearless. I dropped down onto the cat's back immediately, wrapping one gnarled, clawed hand over the cat's large, toothy mouth, and at the same time bringing the sharp talon of my other claw across the cat's thickly furred throat, preventing its death screams, and releasing its life blood in one quick motion. I dragged the cat's corpse behind the tree as quickly and quietly as I could. Still, the old woman seemed to quicken her steps. I had to know if she had seen me. I had never come so close to the village in daylight hours before. Even now, despite the danger of my being seen, my greatest fear was to see my secret friend amongst the hated fearful ones, as if she might become one of them simply by seeing her amongst them. At the same time, perhaps after having saved her from certain death, I had earned the right to approach closer to the village than I had before. Either way, I came closer that day than I had ever before, without the darkness to hide me. It was there that I first saw her. A woman, a young, beautiful woman, nothing like the old woman I had followed, except for one crucial detail. She walked without fear. Her hair looked as if it tasted of honey. Her eyes, when I caught a glimpse of them, was the color of the pond where I had first seen my own reflection, but did not make me think of terror or my monstrous face. I found myself drawn to her. I was unaware of any other emotions, so I told myself it was curiosity that made her so much more interesting than the old woman. My chest filled with a strange urge to touch this woman in a way I had never before imagined, to press my lips against her lips, to trace my hands across her flesh, but not to cause pain or kill. I wanted to give her pleasure with my demonic touch. This was a magic I instinctively feared. Stronger than my gnarled hands, stronger even than the fire I had created that ate half of the forest before its hunger had waned. I knew if I did not flee, I would be trapped by her unknowing, fearless gaze. So I ran. I ran as if I was the one pursued by a monster. Still, I could not escape the spell of the young woman's eyes had placed upon me. In the following days, my breath would halt in my lungs when I thought of those eyes, and an unexplained warmth crawled inside me like gentle worms. I resisted the power of her spell for 7 days before I returned to the village, seeking this newfound horror. I knew I had to return in the daylight hours to see the young woman I had never seen when I crept up to the village at night. As I stalked through the bushes on the outskirts of the village, trying to find a good vantage point to watch the center of town, my stomach began to growl from its hunger. I had found myself unable to eat in the 7 days since I had first glimpsed the young woman's eyes. As I hunted for a glimpse of the young woman, a twig snapped behind me. My senses attuned to the noise, and I began to hear a heavy, bated breathing. Someone was hunting me. I pressed my body against a nearby tree, willing my skin to take on the yellows and browns of the tree bark and various lichens on the tree's trunk, as experience had taught me to do. Soon my huntress appeared. It was the young woman. Now it was I who was afraid. The spell had once again taken hold, my breath coming in short, ragged gasps as the gentle, warm worms once again began to wriggle about within my chest. Finally, it was hunger that allowed me to move. As she passed by, I pounced. But she turned at the sound, her powerful, mesmerizing eyes locked with mine. My mind faltered, and I became suddenly unsure of myself. If only my appearance had frightened her. If only she had uttered a scream, my claws would not have been stayed, and I would have been saved from the unbreakable chains that held me from that day forward. She did not. She smiled. "Hi," she said, stepping forward and placing her small, delicate hand into the dirty flesh and dried mud of my monstrous claw. My fate was sealed. I was hers. Forever. Okay, so that is The Demon's Child. As I said at the beginning, the short stories in this book will be connected to the larger novella that we will start reading next time. And so, as the continuation of the book, as in a continuation of this story in book 2, we will hear more of The Demon's Child. So you're not going to be left hanging there forever. In book 2, we will finish more of that story. But that will be it for today. Next time, we will begin the novella. And I'm not quite sure how far we will get into it, but we will read at least a chapter or two. And these will continue coming out every Tuesday. I will still be putting out a video this Saturday, of course, on my regular programming, if I don't put out anything sooner. Okay, so that'll be it for this episode. Thank you once again for joining us, and I do hope that you were enjoying the fictional series that we are reading. If you want to purchase a copy, I will leave a link to that here in the video, as well as in the description portion of the post. Okay, so that's going to be it for this episode. Thank you once again for joining us. And until next time, bright blessings and an interesting fate. This has been Sorcerer Tal.